Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website, taxpayer.com. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thanks for having us.
Kris, we're in the middle of a very short election campaign in Canada, with billions and billions of dollars of election promises being made by every party, many of them not costed out. Who's going to pay for these promises?
Absolutely every single one of them will be paid for by taxpayers. And this is what we really need to stress to listeners and to voters. When a politician knocks on your door and promises you, as the old king used to say, a chicken in every pot, you need to look them dead in the eye and say, how much is this going to cost me? With interest. Because we have negative money right now. We are in deep debt. We are more than $1 trillion in debt as a country. So whenever a politician's promising you a new shiny object, whether that's, a house or a hospital or, paving your local curling rink's parking lot, you're going to pay for that with interest. And that politician needs to be able to do the math and explain to you how it's going to be paid for. It's going to be paid for through hiking taxes. Is it going to be paid for through reducing spending in other areas? Are they going to save money? Are they going to stop wasting it in other areas? Like, you name it. But they have to have numbers behind them. And you're right. It looks like, fingers crossed, we hope that they're able to do it, but the Parliamentary Budget Office has warned they might run out of runway here, meaning since this happened so suddenly, this snap election, they may not have time to fully cost out the party's platforms. And usually they provide a great service where they're able to go through it in mostly broad strokes, but with some pretty good data, and say this is generally what, the Acme Party or the Flying Monkey parties promises are going to cost you. This time around, they may not have enough time.
The City of Burnaby is, I think, unique in Canada. They have, I think, over $1 billion surplus. When the city needs money, it borrows from itself. And if you live on a street and you say, I'd like to have a speed bump out there, they say, no problem. And then you get a bill, and so do your neighbors, for $600 to cover the cost of the speed bump. You want more street lights on your street? You get the bill for that street light. And there are streets in Burnaby that don't have street lights. All the neighbors have put up their own because it was cheaper than the city doing the job. The 3 speed bumps on the street I used to live on, I thought they were made out of gold because the bill, I said, really? We have 8 homes all getting $600 bills. What were those speed bumps made out of?
Tungsten. Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, in Burnaby, I think taxpayers are made very aware of the cost of something that you've asked for that nobody else has.
That's a great point. And whenever these politicians make a promise, there should just be picture like a great big, novelty price tag popping up next to their head or popping up next to the shiny thing that they're offering you. And that's how much you will owe for this. And because we're in so much debt, that's how much we'll owe plus interest for this. So that daycare program that the Liberals have been promising now for, 20-something years, that will be your grandkids that are around right now, they'll be paying for that when they're adults. Like, this is how far in we're in here. So folks really need to remember that they need to ask the costs of these things, and as soon as the Parliamentary Budget Officer has any data on this, they need to tell them how much it's going to cost.
I know Prime Minister Trudeau was asked very recently in Vancouver about monetary policy, and he said, I don't think about it.
That's very clear, unfortunately, that he doesn't think about monetary policy. It really is evident that he doesn't. And I'm not trying to get personal here, but he's out of his depth on this stuff. And when he says something flippant like that, and the whole quote, people are like, oh, you cut off the quote. It's like, no, the whole quote isn't any better. He said, paraphrasing, "You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy. I think about families." Well, who do you think monetary policy affects? Of course, it's humans. It's Canadians. Canadians make up families. So that's a throwaway line to say. Now, for him not to care or think about monetary policy is a major issue, because monetary policy involves things such as the Bank of Canada. It involves things such as the decision whether or not to, so quote-unquote, print money, to add more money into circulation. Now, economists will explain this in a very complicated way, but the most simple way of explaining it is that means you'll have too many dollars chasing too few things that you're going to buy and sell. So too many dollars running up against too few widgets. So that is often what happens. And so this is part of the inflation risk here. We're seeing sky-high inflation. They're now predicting that, let's hope not, brace for it, we could see 4% this fall, inflation. And what that does is that reduces the value of your purchasing. So if you're going to the grocery store and inflation is at 4%, and generally groceries are hit pretty hard with that, that means that your groceries cost you 4% more. You can afford 4% less. We don't vote on this. It's really kind of it's almost a form of a hidden tax, is what inflation is. And so when we see things like shelter and food and fuel and all of these essentials to life inching up this way with inflation, and then to have a prime minister who's on the campaign hustings say, I don't think about monetary policy, that's the crux of the problem. Nobody's wanting him to be, an Adam Smith level economist, okay? But he needs to at least think about it, and he needs to have experts around him to explain it, and explain it well when the reporters ask him about it. He can't be flippant.
Yes, and also government inflation figures, the official CPI as they call it, don't include fuel, they don't include energy, they don't include housing, they don't include taxes.
Well, then that's meaningless, right? But the outside agencies, from what I understand and what I've read, quite a few articles on this, especially in places like Bloomberg, the outside agencies are the ones saying that we're cranking up inflation, and they did include things like food and shelter. It's just crazy. I encourage everybody, actually, to look this up. Look up what our inflation is at right now, and to your point, make sure you're not just going on the Government of Canada website or, taking it from their press releases. Go to the outside agencies that measure these things, and then go through the data bit by bit. So how much is our food going up? How much is our housing going up? How much is our gasoline going up? Our fuel? We'll tell you that the taxes on gasoline are outrageously expensive. We pay about 68 cents per liter in taxes and fees on our gasoline here in Vancouver. That's why you see those outrageous gas prices. And when people depend on their vehicles to go to work, to go to school, to go to the grocery store, as many of us do, that is going to add to your cost of living. That is causing your affordability to go down. And every time we ask people, just myself personally in the grocery lineup or even formally through surveys, what's your number one issue right now during the election campaign? Almost always it's something along the lines of affordability, cost of living. Everything bloody well costs more than it did a few years ago, and I'm struggling to afford it. We're hearing this from people from all walks of life.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, they keep talking about affordable housing. Isn't the way to make housing more affordable is to build more homes with backyards where people can have a garden and a place for the kids to play, or for, if you're older, a place to just relax?
And let your dog out for a bit.
Yeah.
And not have to go to, several blocks down to try to go to a park. Yeah. This seems like a no-brainer. And again, we mentioned Adam Smith last segment. This shouldn't be rocket science here. A lot of this is supply and demand. So the demand for homes, real homes, family homes, including ones with yards, like you just point out, is high. Most Canadians want to be able to afford their own home that they can raise their families in, or that they can retire with loved ones in, or even if they live alone, a place where they can have their own space. And for many folks, a backyard or a garden, as they would have called it in the UK, is really important. You know, people are infinitely complex individuals, as individuals. So just think of how complex you are in your own life and what sort of hobbies and nice things you like to do. It could be gardening. It could be playing with your kids in the backyard. It could be running the sprinkler. It could be playing with your dog. And now multiply that across millions of people and all of their needs. Lots of folks want their own home. And so the solution here is more supply. We need more supply on the market to bring those prices down. And government strangling the housing building and the housing market through more regulation, more taxation, dragging their feet, making it take a heck of a lot longer than it needs to build new homes, doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. Even if you just take something as simple as the PST here in British Columbia, you got to figure on how much you spend on building a new house from the ground up. Not even a super fancy mansion, just your average rancher, okay? Like, 1,600 square feet with the garage. From the concrete to the studs to the electrical wiring, all of the fixtures and switches up, keep looking up to the shingles. Every bit of that is nailed with PST. And typically, if you do the math, that adds easily more than $20,000 onto the price tag of building a home. And so we have to go where the money is here. I encourage everybody to look up the BC budget. Let's pick on the province of British Columbia here just as an example, okay? Look up the province of British Columbia's budget and look up revenue by source, okay? That shows you where all their different taxes are coming in. The land transfer tax, meaning in a red-hot real estate market like we've had here basically forever in BC, the land transfer tax is now it's more than $1 billion a year. That is becoming an essential part of their government revenue stream. And so when they have that kind of money coming in the door, they kind of get painted into a corner because they spend that money. Out the door it goes. They don't keep that for a rainy day. That isn't a surplus they're banking somehow. It goes out the door. And so when governments start promising you, government tract housing that not many people ideally want to live in, that's not the solution. The solution is to free up builders so that people have more homes to choose from. There's more supply on the market. They can shop around and the prices can come down.
The carbon tax, I hear nobody's talking about it during this election campaign because all parties want a carbon tax.
Yeah, it's really disappointing. To be clear, the Conservative Party of Canada for years now, well over a decade, has opposed carbon taxes in Canada, period. It has been one of their major issues. And interestingly, every time they've had a leadership race, the person who endorses a carbon tax usually comes in around dead last when they're running. So this is an election that's happening within a party. So the general Canadian doesn't vote. It's only party members that vote. So the party members who vote usually vote against things like a carbon tax. Aaron O'Toole won the leadership for the Conservative Party of Canada. He even signed a pledge with us, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, saying he would scrap Justin Trudeau's carbon tax and he would not create one of his own. He's clearly broken that promise, so he's planning on a carbon tax, the first one, of up to $50 a ton, okay? And then the second carbon tax that a lot of people don't know about, but we have one here in BC right now. It adds 14 cents a liter of gasoline and 15.5 cents a liter for diesel. He's going to model his second carbon tax after BC's. So on average, if they form government, they don't have a timeline for this yet, on average, it'll be about 25 cents a liter of gasoline will be carbon taxes under the Conservative Party's plan. That's $18 per minivan extra. That's $30 per light-duty pickup truck extra just in the carbon taxes. Now, Trudeau's Trudeau's carbon tax, they had said, oh no, we have no plans on jacking it up more than $50 a ton. Well, they quickly broke that promise, and now they're planning on jacking it up to $170 per ton. So now we're getting into some pretty crazy money. The combined carbon taxes, because he's planning his second carbon tax too, it's basically a fuel standard that's tucked into government regulations, is how best to explain a second carbon tax. That's now going to cost as well. And so the Conservatives and the Liberals both are promising carbon taxes. So is the NDP. Pretty much carbon copy, no pun intended, of the Liberal plan.
And the Green Party, we know, isn't much of a factor in the federal election. Their policies have been pretty consistent, so no surprises there.
No.
But their leader is in such a battle to just try to get a seat in Parliament. She's not doing a national campaign. I wonder how their candidates feel about that, where they don't have a face to help them out locally.
No, good question. Interestingly, so, just taking off my CTF hat for a moment and setting it aside, I covered Parliament Hill a lot. And what was always odd for folks, it took a while for Elizabeth May, the former Green Party leader, to get her seat. She was sitting on the outside for quite a while too. And it's odd because the Green Party has, I would say, pocket support in certain geographical regions, such as the Gulf Islands. That's a pretty strong area of support. So good question as to why they would pick a riding that is really tough to win, but maybe they have data we don't. Maybe they're seeing an upward trend based on her own personal popularity there. Maybe they think that she can get in. But typically, when a new party is starting out, they either have to be really careful and, call their shots, so to speak, during a by-election, right? Because it's lower turnout. It's only the really committed that are really into it that take advantage of voting during a by-election. They can do it that way. Or they can do big, deep dives into their research and find out where they have the highest concentration of support and then, quote-unquote, parachute a candidate in to try to get that first foothold. Because once you get that first foothold, then you start getting media attention, you're invited in for interviews, you have, opportunities to speak in the House of Commons, all sorts of things change and open up when you actually land that seat. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens at the Green Party. But yeah, they mostly agree, generally speaking, with the current plan of the Liberal Party, $170 a ton. We need to stress, this adds, you want to talk about cost of living? This adds so much cost to the cost of living. If you just take a look at the numbers, it adds, I think it's around $800 per year. This is what this rate is going to go up to just to heat your new home with natural gas. Now imagine how much it costs, say, in an older home that uses oil or propane. That's just for the cheap version. That's $800 extra. And then if you start imagining how often you're filling up, if you're filling up your minivan, and you've combined all of Trudeau's carbon taxes within the next 9 years, that's going to cost you around $36 extra just to fill up your minivan, to take the kids to hockey or to go to the grocery store. This is going to become unaffordable for people real fast, and they need to pay attention to it. It also adds on in some ways to the cost of groceries as well. So folks really need to start paying attention to how much it's costing them to move around and to heat their homes, because the carbon tax really punishes people.
A capital gains tax on the sale of your primary residence. Again, I haven't heard any federal politician talk about this, but it certainly was floated before the election was called.
It sure was. And so this is the sort of thing that we need to keep a close eye on, because it's politically unpopular, meaning they won't say boo about it during an election, but it could easily be slapped the moment that they gain office. And so what this is right now, if you own one home, the home you live in, it's your house. When you sell it, you don't pay a big tax on the profit you made on that house. Now, a lot of people use the sale of their home to literally pay to eat and heat and all of that in their senior years if they're elderly. They also can take that money and give it to some of their Gen X kids or their millennial grandkids so that they can, save up for a down payment for their home. Or even on the opposite end of the ladder, if you're a young couple and you're, squeezed into a high-rise condo. We were talking about backyards a little while ago. If you're squeezed into that condo and you're saving every nickel, and then you sell that condo in order to be able to afford and move up the housing ladder and afford that place at the backyard for your new baby and your dog. That money that you make from the sale of that condo, every dollar of that goes into your next house. And then your next house. That's how people move along. And it's also, like we said, a major nest egg. People put a lot of work and effort and money into their homes, and they depend on that as their nest egg to take care of them. It's almost a form of savings for them. Home ownership is deeply valued in Canada. And so just picture that. But right now, the federal government, is spending $250,000 in partnership to conduct a study with a group called Generation Squeeze at UBC. This study includes the idea of having what it would be called a capital gains tax or a home equity tax. Basically, you pay a tax when you sell your own home, the one you're living in right now. You have to pay the tax then. Their previous studies, Jim, have estimated that they could take in $7 billion per year from this tax. This is in black and white. They are studying it. And if they still insist, we're not planning on it, okay, fine. Why is it then, for the past few years, when we file our taxes, those CRA forms have a little line on it, and they ask you if you have sold your house, your primary residence, and if so, how much money did you make? If they're not planning on taxing you on it, why are they asking you that? So if they're going to put up their hands and say, no, we would never touch people's nest eggs, we're not planning this home equity tax, okay, fine, prove it. Take that requirement off those tax forms, like right now.
Kris, what else should we be keeping an eye on right now during this, well, I know it's election season, I call it lying season, but whatever it is, it's costly.
It is. It's like the fibbing Olympics.
Yeah.
It really is. You have to sit back. What I would recommend, and that we don't care which party it is you're watching, if you're watching this on a screen or you're listening to it on a podcast or something and you're watching politicians make these promises, really think about what they're saying. Ask yourself if what they're saying is possible. Can they solve problem A or B that they're promising you to solve? Is it affordable? Is it sustainable? Can we afford this in the future? And ask yourself as a gut check, does this make sense? Like, for example, does nibbling around the edges and extra taxing a house flipper, does that really affect the affordability of homes? You have to ask yourself these things, because a lot of times these politicians will make little boutique announcements in order to wedge on their opponent, is what it's called. But you need to ask yourself how this will actually affect you and your family and your livelihood, and if you can afford it. And so we actually have a really good toolkit on our website. It instructs you on how to write a polite but very firm letter, a good email, how to make that good phone call, what questions to ask a politician when they come looking for your vote. And again, doesn't matter which party. Parties can change their promises. So, for example, in Nova Scotia's recent provincial election, it was, generally speaking, it was the Liberals who were saying, who were the governing party at the time, that they wanted to balance the budget within the next 4 years. It was mostly fiscally prudent-ish, right? And so that was the Liberals. It was actually the PCs, the Progressive Conservatives, that were saying, no, we're going to spend more. So it was a bit of a role reversal depending on what era you're in. And it was the PCs that got elected. So we're not picking on a party, we're picking on ideas here. And so when you see politicians and their plans, ask yourself how much it's going to cost you and if you can trust that this person is going to do what they say they're going to do. It's all in your hands. Elections are really important. And so we would encourage everybody to pay as much attention as they can, given the circumstances.
Yeah, and when they say, I'll put it in writing, I'll guarantee my promise, Jean Chrétien put his I'll get rid of the GST promise in his famous red book. Yep. He never did it. No, and he didn't even consider it. It just fell right off the table. And, this is something that we're asking ourselves too. We had all of the Conservative Party leadership contendants sign our pledge.
like in front of video and photograph and out loud with their faces. They read it aloud and then signed it. And then Aaron O'Toole broke that promise. So we can only, hold them to account so much, right? Do you pin them down and give them a polygraph? You really need to hold folks accountable when they break their promises. And so that goes for every party. Last time around, remember when Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, had said he was going to balance the budget by the year 2019, so before COVID? He blew that out of the sky, like not even close to a balanced budget. So we chased him around Canada with Fibber. And Fibber is our big mascot with a long wooden nose, and he looks like a marionette who calls people out when they don't tell the truth. And so we need to use all of our tools in our toolboxes to really hold these folks account, because it's easy for them to turn around and promise you the sky. And it's much harder for them to actually deliver and to deliver on a budget. And that's where we come in. We must hold them to account.
Yeah, it's too bad they couldn't sign a contract. If I don't live up to my promises, I owe every taxpayer $1,000.
Interesting. There's kind of a form of that here in BC. Now, they've suspended it for now because of the emergency. But say you were a minister, a provincial minister, and your department, like your ministry, your responsibility comes in over budget. Like you're running a deficit, you actually take a pay cut, which is good. We should have more tools of accountability like that. Here in BC, we also have provincial recall. That means if an MLA is doing a really terrible job, if, the threshold's darn high, we'd like to see it lower, but, we're working on it. If an MLA is doing a very bad job between elections, if you get enough signatures in that riding, you can turf them. And even if they're not successful, having that tool, we're sure, holds more of them to account. It makes them think twice before really screwing over citizens and taxpayers. We need to see that at the federal level. We need to see that, frankly, at the municipal level across Canada. And the more tools we have to hold these folks to account, the better leaders we will have, and they'll do a better job.
Kris, where can people go if they want more information about the Taxpayers Federation?
We would love to hear from them. We have several petitions on pretty much everything you can imagine, from everything on local municipal recall to new Auditor General requests we're making, to getting rid of the PST on used items, and all the way up to the big stuff, like no home equity tax federally, no carbon tax federally. They can go to our website, taxpayer.com. They can sign any of those, and they can read up about the CTF.
Kris, thank you so much for being on the Goddard Report.
Thank you for caring so much.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Her website, taxpayer.com. And do you have an email people can contact you at?
Yes, I would love to hear from them directly. So my name is Kris with a K. So my email is ksims, S-I-M-S, at taxpayer.com.
If you have any questions for Kris, we will ask that question for you if you send it to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.